The American War of Independence, one of the most significant events in modern history, marked the birth of the United States of America and put an end to British rule over the 13 colonies of North America. This conflict, which began as a protest against laws deemed unjust, soon turned into a political and military revolution destined to change the balance of power in the world forever. But how did this war begin? And what drove the colonists, initially loyal subjects of the King of England, to rise up against the mother country? It all began in the 18th century, when the 13 British colonies on the Atlantic coast of North America were experiencing a period of prosperity. The population was growing rapidly, the economy was flourishing thanks to trade, agriculture, and artisanal production. Despite their prosperity, the colonies found themselves in an ambiguous position. They were subject to the control of the British Crown, but had no elected representatives in the Parliament of Westminster. Laws were imposed from London without the consent of the colonists, and this fueled a growing sense of frustration and injustice. This tension exploded after the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, a global conflict between the major European powers, which saw Britain triumph over France and secure vast territories in the American continent. However, the war had left London with a huge debt. To restore its finances, the British government decided to impose new taxes on the colonies, arguing that they should contribute to the costs of their own defense and administration. Discontent took shape with the introduction of the Sugar Act, which taxed sugar and other imported goods, and especially with the Stamp Act of 1765, which imposed a tax on every legal document, newspaper, contract, and even playing cards. These measures were seen as an unacceptable interference and led to widespread protests, economic boycotts, and, in some cases, acts of violence. The famous slogan, "No taxation without representation," became the rallying cry of those who demanded the right to be consulted on fiscal and political matters. Resistance committees such as the Sons of Liberty soon emerged, which organized protests and coordinated actions against the British presence. Tensions grew in the following years, also due to other unpopular measures, such as the Townshend Act of 1767 and the Tea Act of 1773, which gave the East India Company a monopoly on the sale of tea in the colonies. The situation came to a head in December 1773 with the famous Boston Tea Party. A group of colonists, dressed as Native Americans, boarded 3 British ships in Boston Harbor and threw over 300 chests of tea into the sea to protest against the taxation imposed without representation. The event, although symbolic, was considered by London as an act of open rebellion. The British reaction was very harsh. They enacted the so-called Coercive Acts, a series of punitive laws that limited the autonomy of Massachusetts, closed the port of Boston, and strengthened military control. These measures, instead of calming spirits, pushed the colonies to unite. In September of 1774, representatives of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia in the First Continental Congress, an assembly that marked the first concrete step toward political unity. Here it was decided to boycott British products and organize a common militia to defend themselves from further abuses. The following year, on April 19, 1775, the first armed clashes broke out in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. The British Army attempted to disarm the rebels, but was repulsed. It was the beginning of the Revolutionary War. In 1776, the conflict took on a new dimension. On the 4th of July, the Second Continental Congress approved the Declaration of Independence, largely drafted by Thomas Jefferson. This document not only proclaimed formal separation from the United Kingdom, but affirmed revolutionary principles: the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, popular sovereignty, and equality before the law. For the first time in modern history, a colony broke away from its mother country, claiming not only autonomy, but also a new political model based on the natural rights of man. The war was long, hard, and fought in extremely difficult conditions. The American troops, led by the charismatic George Washington, had to face a much larger and better equipped professional army. Military victories were initially sporadic, but the colonists showed tenacity, taking advantage of their knowledge of the territory and guerrilla warfare. A A crucial moment was the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, where the British Army suffered a heavy defeat. This success convinced France to officially intervene on the side of the Americans. French support, led by General Lafayette, was decisive, as was the help of other European powers, such as Spain and the Netherlands, which further weakened the British Empire with military and financial actions. The final blow came in 1781, with the Battle of Yorktown, Virginia. American and French forces, in a joint maneuver, surrounded the army of British General Cornwallis, who was forced to surrender. It was the effective end of hostilities. The war officially ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which recognized the independence of the United States and defined its territorial boundaries up to the Mississippi River. The conflict had profound repercussions on a global scale. The American Revolution inspired other liberation and reform movements, beginning with the French Revolution of 1789. It demonstrated that it was possible to overthrow an established order and create a republic on democratic basis, although, in practice, the ideals of equality and freedom were not immediately extended to all. Slavery remained widespread and women continued to be excluded from political life. The American War of Independence was not only a military conflict, but a cultural and political revolution. It brought to the forefront concepts that would shape modern thought: popular sovereignty, constitutionalism, individual rights, religious freedom, and freedom of the press. Thus was born a new nation, the United States of America, founded on a model of republican government that would influence the entire world. A young and imperfect country, but animated by an innovative vision of the relationship between citizens and the state. In conclusion, the American War of Independence was much more than a simple tax revolt. It was the starting point of an epical transformation that redefined the very concept of freedom and self-determination. A conflict that, starting from the customs houses of Boston, ended up rewriting the rules of global politics.